now via the Coward Global Satellite Network. All right, let's start with this. So I call it the Canadian process, the Raptors, and then the process in Philly. Let's start with the Raptors. I do think they're deeper. I do think they're better. I think they're going to be a handful. I think they're going to give Cleveland 6-7 games, but in the end, I watched the fourth quarter last night, Chris, and I'm like, okay, that's a playoff atmosphere. I'm a little cynical because I don't think they'll finish close games late. Am I wrong?
Well, look, Colin, I don't look at last night's game as being an indicator of what could happen in the playoffs. I mean, the Raptors were a little ragged, third game in 4 nights. What did bother me a little bit, though, at the end was that we saw kind of a devolution of their offense. You know, all season long, it's been free-flowing, three-point shooting, spread the ball around. What I saw in the last couple of minutes of that game was, all right, let's get DeMar DeRozan going by going one-on-one. Let's get Kyle Lowry going by going one-on-one. That type of offensive strategy is not going to beat Cleveland in the postseason. But I'm a believer that game last night is more the exception than the rule, that they are going to be better offensively, that these bench guys, Siakam, Van Vliet, Wright, Pirtle, guys that have been huge all season long, will continue to play that way. And let's not forget, they're probably going to have home court advantage in the Eastern Conference. They've only lost 6 times at home, the only team in the conference with single-digit losses at home. I think they have to be the front runner right now.
Listen, I don't care about stats, and I'm not an MVP guy. Give it to whoever you want. I mean, at one point, Karl Malone won it over Jordan. I don't care. I really don't. I'm more into the games and the playoffs, and some people like stats and awards. I totally get it. Listen, James Harden's going to win the award. I get it. But I want you to at least acknowledge this. Here we go. I'm going to try to be convincing. Mikde D Antoni is the Chip Kelly of basketball. He has a system, and it elevates quarterback/point guards. Steve Nash, an MVP. Chris Duhon's best year. Jeremy Lin's best month. James Harden's best season. When he coached the Lakers, there was a young Laker guard named Kendall. What was his name? Kendall Marshall. He averaged 9 assists a game under D'Antoni. I love Harden. He's going to win the award. Can I make the argument, though? He made Jeremy Lin revolutionary, that some of those numbers for Harden they're a system, and they're elevated due to the Chip Kelly of the NBA.
No, you can't make that argument at all. Look, it's one thing if James Harden came to Houston, coming from Oklahoma City, started playing for Mikde D Antoni, and put up these types of numbers. But James Harden, in his third year in the league, playing for Oklahoma City, averaged 17 points per game. He went to Houston to play for Kevin McHale, and that immediately jumped to 25, and he's been averaging that or more ever since. Now, what Mikde D Antoni has done is, you're right, with the playmaking. He put the ball in James Harden's hand last year and said, look, make plays. He took advantage and harnessed something that previous coaches had not harnessed. But this guy was always that talented. And look, people that want to hand LeBron like the MVP for what he's done this year, I get it. I saw him play live in Portland last week. He was phenomenal. He's been phenomenal all season long. But James Harden's only had 2 months this season where he hasn't averaged 30 points per game. And both those months were abbreviated months. In October, where it was a shorter schedule, and in January, where he was hurt for half the month. All the other months, full months, he's averaged 30. He's great regardless of who the coach is.
Could I argue, though, that LeBron can do anything James can do? James can't play every night. He's missed games, can't rebound, doesn't pass like LeBron, isn't as intimidating. That LeBron's like a sportscaster who can do host, opinion, journalism, play-by-play. He can do everything. He's a Swiss Army knife. He could do Harden. He could average 37. But there are things Harden can't do that LeBron can. Isn't that a reasonable argument?
It's absolutely a reasonable argument. And, it's a separate conversation to say who's the better player. The MVP, though, is the guy that's had the best season so far, and James Harden has. I factor in for MVP voting, and I'm a voter, and Harden's locked up my vote. I factor in the fact that in the Western Conference, the more difficult conference, James Harden's team is going to be number 1. That in these huge games he plays in, James Harden steps up and plays. And let me tell you something about LeBron. And I don't want to be critical of LeBron because I know how much effort he uses offensively. But watching that game against Portland, LeBron had some of the worst defensive sequence that I've ever seen. There was one where he just kind of looked at Yusuf Nurkic underneath the basket, just sort of stared at him and waved at his teammates to go down and double team. There was another one, end of the first quarter, clock running down. Al Farouk Aminu catches a kickout pass, and LeBron just stands there. clearly LeBron has kind of decided he's got to pick and choose his spots defensively to keep that energy up offensively.
Yeah.
But his biggest knock on this year is that defense. He is having one of his worst defensive seasons of his career.
Okay, we got a couple of things, almost breaking news stuff. Per Woj, you know Woj, I know Woj. He breaks stories and stuff. He said the Spurs held a meeting last night, and they talked about Kawhi, urging him to return. Okay, this is weird. We always knew that Kawhi is not overly verbal. He's like, people say he's the quietest pro athlete they've ever seen. Then there's the doctor situation. What's going on here, Chris? Is he a Spur for life? Does he resent the organization? What's going on?
Well, I mean, let's start from the beginning here. Kawhi Leonard it clearly is dealing with something when it comes to this quad injury. When Kawhi Leonard came back and didn't feel right, that really scared him. I mean, that really, from what I was told, that really affected him negatively and made him even more cautious. Now, the Spurs, they've physically cleared Kawhi for the last month, but that hasn't, affected Kawhi. He went to get that second opinion in New York over the All-Star break. He is still waiting to feel completely 100% right before he comes back. And that, what I've been told, has frustrated a lot of his teammates there because, look, they're in a dogfight right now.
Yep.
They're sitting in the back end of the Western Conference playoff picture, but they also know that if Kawhi Leonard comes back, they're 3-4 games away from maybe being like the third seed before the end of the season. They know how badly they need this guy, and they just can't seem to understand with the team clearing him why he can't come back. Now, just to answer the last part of your question, is he a Spur for life? Look, there's a long way to go before we get to the summer of 2019. And I've always maintained that the best player, or one of the best players in basketball, who has never shown an affinity to play in Los Angeles, New York, one of those things, and maybe the best franchise in professional sports, are going to find a way to come to some sort of resolution to all this and stick together for the long term.
Chris Mannix, Karan Butler, new radio show, debuts Sunday noon at 3. Before I let you go, I watched the Celtics play the Wizards. I think it was last Friday or Saturday. It was hard to watch. Boston came back to win. I watched them the other night. Kyrie's not playing. He had 3 so-so games in March. They're looking for a second opinion. Listen, I mean, Kyrie has a history. I went and looked it up the other day. His first few years pre-LeBron, he was playing 60 games. Now, one of those was a strike-shortened season. But Chris, he's not a huge athlete. He's not LeBron. We've got another injury. There's a second opinion. I'll ask you again. What's going on here? Could they sit him out for the rest of the regular season?
I think that's possible. Now, from what I've been told, he's